What's up? My name is Erico Rocha. I'm very happy to speak to you here of the Hotmart Masters event. It is very common today to me to step aside from my business to speak, to lecture, but that's the way it is. What we have here at Ignição Digital, which is my company, a love and immense gratitude for Hotmart. If it weren't for Hotmart, probably many of our students wouldn't be able to have the results as we are going to show here. Why? Because Hotmart makes them not necessarily having to worry about something that is super important, however extremely complex, which is tools, mainly how to use tools to receive payments. And the topic of my lecture today are 4 lessons that I learned with a turnover of, now be astonished. 4 lessons that I learned with a turnover of 202,811,993 reais and 57 cents. That was invoiced in the last 9 months. The first lesson was create a figure, some kind of browser. In a way, the formula is a very specific step-by-step that takes people to 6 and 7. But what we saw, it mainly when observing the step-by-step of 2017, is that many people did not follow these steps. And the fact that I was there watching, I saw that they weren't following the steps, and sometimes I saw that they weren't following the steps, but they didn't see that they weren't following steps, so it wasn't clear. Then I discovered, look, we are going to create a browser, and that browser is going to be designed for each person, so it will be designed for each insider. So when the person enrolled the insiders in this program, they received the name of John Doe, whatever the name is, and that person was going to guide them during the entire process. What would it be to navigate it? Navigating is the next step. Navigating is when you, let's say it like this, you skip the step. Navigating is recalculating the route based on where you are. It works like a GPS, and that navigator started to work, and that was the first lesson, because the introduction of that kind of resource for insiders was very good. The navigator not only went on to guide the insider, but also started creating an internal insider tab. What is an internal tab? Why did some people have results and others didn't? To what extent did one person succeed and others not? When we do here in Brasilia, we do a blood test in a laboratory called Saving. From time to time I go to the nutritionist, a doctor, and they ask for a blood test. And the good thing is that every time I take a blood test in that same laboratory, they have all my history. So I have known my testosterone level for 3 years. I know my triglyceride level, I know my cholesterol level. They all have that history, including vitamin D. So that browser, as they were indicated for each insider, we began to understand and create a tab. This tab was created in Google Spreadsheets at the beginning, then we migrated to a service called Microsoft Money. And in this file I know not only the special data of insiders, if he's here or there, I know what kind of tasks he completed, what he did and what he didn't do. I know how many times he launched it. I know not only how many times he launched it, but what was the result of each launch, when was each launch. And we started to create an incredible database, end-to-end, and it began with that incredible database. We began to discover where the insiders, some of those enrolled in the program, when they stopped the program. What did they find more difficult? Things that were easy for me, things that were clear for me, weren't so clear for them. And then we redesigned the program to, let's say, to compensate for those difficulties. My intention here is that with these lessons, maybe it's to provoke insight so that you can work on improving your own product. Why do I think that is important? Because even if we learn about launches, even if we learn any other marketing techniques in a great future, in the long term. What will define if your company grows will be the ability to generate results with your students. At first, they believe in your persuasion, in your word, in your image, in your authority, or in some other mental trigger that identifies in their head. But at the end of the day, what will remain is, if you have been in the market for a long time, as I have been, since 2013, in our first launch of this product, actually the launching formula, which is our methodology, what made us grow year after year is our ability to generate more and more results, because people talk, especially now, in the era of social media, so that was a great insight. The question I ask you is, in your program, do you have an exact record of everything your students do? And sometimes that is not possible in a lower ticket program. But when you create a more expensive program, it makes it possible to place such an infrastructure. You gain intelligence, and with that intelligence you end up discovering things and you end up improving your program. By collecting this data, you end up improving the program. Eventually, we here with what we learned in Insiders on that battlefield with all that data, eventually, once a year, it is updated in the formula itself, so we use that as a laboratory. Suggestion number 1, have a personal navigator. Suggestion 2, create a file, have that person accompany. In the same way that doctors accompany the data of a patient, in the same way that perhaps a personal trainer knows how many kilos a person can lift or how much they lift now, you know how much the weight is. In the same way that a nutritionist must know the person's weight, what they should be eating, what type of diet or the protocol they follow, it is interesting that you put that in your program to create that kind of intelligence. The second lesson that we inserted here, that made a lot of difference, is something we called, what we call launch analysis. The navigator is someone who can answer questions, but answering questions is not the same thing as giving an analysis of what the person did. So in that program, from the first one, since 2018, when I was the one who did it, I already began to analyze releases. What was it? I was doing that almost some kind of live surgery. I think doctors do that. They do surgery, medical students somehow watch or used to watch this kind of surgery before. What happened? I did that exact launch analysis. I put the launches in front of me, and for about an hour and 20 minutes, I analyzed and said what I would improve on that. So what's the big idea behind launch analysis? Answer the questions your customer didn't ask. Sometimes, when you come to your product and you are just being passive about teaching, you only answer the questions your client asked. But what we found in the Insiders program is that the big leaps in performance came from the questions they didn't ask. Sometimes they were asking questions about an issue, I don't know, about the mental trigger of a launch. But what they really needed was to make content. And they were avoiding making content because for some of them, making content was a more uncomfortable attitude than simply thinking about a trick that they were going to do at a launch, about a little word that they were going to change. So this is very important. I ask you, in your program, do you actively have a way to cover the blind spots of your students? We discovered that way, and that way was with a launch analysis. When people were enrolling Insiders in the first year, most of them wanted to do a 6 and 7. Which is what I call brown belt. And when they enrolled the program and did not immediately make the 6 and 7, and they renewed for another year, they called themselves a failing student. Just look at that. They thought that they had failed. And it took me a long time to get to change that mentality that the students had. And one day I discovered how to change that. I remember that I had just started shortly before in an event in 2019 or 2020. I went to do a first jiu-jitsu class, and when I entered the jiu-jitsu class, I saw that there was a white belt, a blue belt, a purple belt, brown belt, and there was a black belt. And the more time the person had been training, of course, the greater the tendency to have a higher graduation. But the more time they have there, the more respect and admiration they had in that context. So wait, why is that in Jiu-Jitsu? The longer the person had been practicing, the better they used to get, the more respect and admiration from their teammates they used to get. But inside us it was the contrary. They felt that they had failed. Then the longer the time they spent there, the less admiration they had for themselves. And the craziest thing about it all is that I think that persuasion is that. Sometimes we think that we have to persuade the person by giving a rational argument, giving an argument that will convince them or pressuring them or placing it in scarcity. But one thing is true, one of the greatest things that I learned in my persuasion life is you need to create a tribe where the action that the person is going to take is an action of self-significance. I'm going to repeat that. That takes time to understand, and I think that people don't understand. We are not taught in school about it. Look, if you want to persuade a thing to do anything, a person to plant bananas, whatever it is, in short, or anything, you need to create a tribe so that after they decide to take an action, that action that they decided to take is seen by that new tribe as a good thing. So, for example, if I want to convince someone to build a business, it's not enough to say, look, entrepreneurship is abundant, in entrepreneurship you're going to have geographic freedom. That doesn't work, because if they have to make that decision to build a business in the tribe where they are inserted, the people with whom they are inserted, they don't value entrepreneurship, they won't decide to build a business, because the human being is more concerned about the statistic sense of belonging, rather than doing the right thing. It is more important for the human being to belong than to do the right thing. It's the same thing with money. When we teach a person to earn a lot of money, if you don't give them a tribe, you don't give them the possibility of belonging to a tribe where they can make money, a lot of money, it is good. They tend to not make money just to stay small enough to fit into the current tribe they are in. That's very crazy. It is very crazy. And for me, when that became clear, I understood that persuasion was the creation of a tribe. If I did not create a tribe for them to fit, where what I'm trying to persuade is seen as something good, they don't do it. Because in the head of the human being, it is embedded that they have to belong. Then the first step is to give a tribe for the people. So what happens? The tribe that I had created in the first program is to renew means to repeat the year. And there I began to create that culture. It was there, if I'm not mistaken, the black belt. I said the 6 and 7 was only the brown belt. Look. If I'm not mistaken, this is the third step. I said that the 6 and 7 was the brown belt, and that most people do not reach the black belt in the first year. It takes time, usually, so I introduced it. And how long does it take? I did some kind of calculation of what I thought, and I think it is about 3 to 4 years, something like that. And first I told them that the first goal isn't the 6 and 7. I increased the goal. Then I told them that in order to reach the goal, it would need more years. The same thing as Jiu-Jitsu, it takes time. I asked people, it takes about 10 to 14 years for a normal person to reach the black belt. So when I step onto the tatami and I put on a white belt, I don't have the expectation of reaching the black belt in the first year. Therefore, remaining on the tatami for 1 or 2 years makes me a more valuable person, makes me more inclined to reach the black belt. Then it was there that the thing began to happen. When I defined that the game was not to be finished in a year, I defined that the game was almost impossible to be finished in a year. It is rare. The black belts who do it in a few years are very rare. I increased the scale and created a tribe where staying longer means reaching further. And if reaching further means more significance, create a tribe where the person has more significance in that tribe, the longer they are in the insider program. we created challenges, and the challenges were more or less like this. I said, I'm going to launch on this day, and I'm challenging everyone to launch on this same day. But the challenge was not only that. So the challenge is much more because it has several mental triggers. The mental triggers make you get into action. For example, there is the mental trigger of the event. There is the mental trigger of the community, because everyone is launching together. There is a mental trigger of scarcity. If you don't come in now, you won't participate in the event. Then there is a certain kind of scarcity, and so on. We have the mental trigger that we call reciprocity, which I'll explain more about how we did it. But anyway, there are several mental triggers, and many other mental triggers lead to action. Mental triggers lead the person to action, and we did that event, and we had hundreds of people launching. We discovered with those challenges that hundreds of people stepped out of their comfort zone and launched. In that first challenge, it even includes making one content per day for 4 weeks before the launch. So we are going to say that it was a brutally intense challenge. But first of all, the people, I think because of those mental triggers, took action. And second of all, because the challenge was intense, they began to generate a lot of results. And third, as they had results, they told other people that they had results. This is the significance, love, and growth for them. 3 things. If you manage the love of the person, how much love they receive. 2. The amount of recognition you receive. 3. Amounts of growth you have at the same time. People are able to do extremely difficult things to increase that kind of reward, that kind of dopamine. Why? When we were created, or our brain was pre-programmed, love means you don't die. The person who loves you keeps you in the tribe. Growth also means significance, and you are in the community too. Then love, growth, and significance long ago meant survival. Today, not necessarily. You can live and survive long enough alone without love. It is not a physiological need, but we like it. So if you give love, growth, and significance to the person, they will tend to do some very crazy things to have more of that. It is as if it were a natural drug, a dopamine injection. So this challenge did that. And we received an idea of a black belt called Mary Fazi to also create a GPS, a checklist sheet, which we call GPS, specific for each person. So we used Google Docs. That was even an idea that was inspired by Mary Fazi from Love to Nurture. So we created a GPS. What's a GPS? We delimited, step by step, every detail of what they had to do to make it easier to do. They just had to do it. Doing is difficult, but they would know what to do. We took this format and put their name in it, and we gave it to them so that the Navigator could track whether she had done something or not, completed the challenge or not. Then, with that reciprocity, with that GPS, we increased clarity, and the result of that meant more launches most of the times. Why many times and why? I don't know exactly how many, because we had no challenges in the previous year. But if we stop to think about those 4, that's where we come in, those 4 lessons that I'm talking about. They are 4 strategic and very important lessons that gave us those results, among other things. Can you imagine making 202,811,993 reais and 57 cents? Where does it come from? I believe that fundamentally, among several other things, from those 4 strategic decisions that we made. Well, yes, those were the 4 lessons that we had so far with that incredible income. It is important just to remember the 4 lessons are navigators, gathering specific data, every detail of your patients or your customers, analysis, which allow you to answer the questions of your clients that have not been asked, also a clear path, a path of more significance, love, and growth. Look, significance, love, and growth for those people who are with you for a long time, because the longer they stay persisting in their journey, the results of it will tend to continue. It is basically that. The rule is very simple. And the most important of all of this is challenge, because challenge increases the amount of action. It gives a reason for action. We say that challenge gives motivation. No, challenge is a reason for action. action. It gathers several mental triggers between communities, reciprocity, scarcity, event, and this makes your client take action. And if your client takes action, they will tend to have more results. And that's it. I hope these 4 lessons helped you a lot, and I hope to see you out there. A big hug, thanks to Hotmart for the opportunity, and see you there. Bye-bye.